He has a few notes there, huh, that he has to look at. It's pretty funny. Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Science or Not. And today we will be recording to a small little video that I found on YouTube, just uploaded a couple of months ago, that still is talking about how climate change is a scam, which I didn't even think we're still there in 2024. After record heat year after record heat year, but we apparently are, and nobody else than Mr. Jordan Peterson, who is pretty known for his long history of science denial and climate change denial, is on another podcast. I don't know what kind of podcast it is. Again, this is stuff that I find in the internet, with the mission to, as we say, peer review shit that's on the internet, and that is exactly what we're going to do here today. So this is about climate change, and I want to give full disclosure. I'm not a climate scientist. I'm a plant scientist, but I am a scientist, a real scientist with, not a proposed one, and this stuff needs to be reviewed because people listen to this shit and they think it is real. And again, Mr. Jordan Peterson is doing this for a really long time, so he's gonna make some really appealing arguments that sound legit, but I will show you. I will show you a couple of things that debunk whatever he says there in a very fast way. So this is not a 100% reaction video because I already watched it once. So I have pulled up a couple of resources for you to just like show you also how easy it is if you listen to something like that. Just how easy it is to really find out that what he's saying is not 100% true. All right, so let's dig right into it, and let's get started. Again, I don't know which kind of podcast it is, and they talked a lot before, so we're going to get started right here.
Political things, and I think, gosh, I wish I had your courage. I'd love to be that confident about things, but often I don't know how to be confident.
Well,
I don't know how to assess.
One of the things that happens when you start being exposed to a wide range of conflicting facts is you actually start to understand how unsettled, for example, even the basic science is in most situations. Like most of what passes for the settled science is nothing of the sort.
So here we are again. And that's really like the same pattern that we have with any science denial or conspiracy theory, which science denial is often like a big piece of conspiracy theories. That happens is that you have somebody who's very confident on camera saying things that are basically not true. So the testing of science and hypothesis, that's part of what the scientific process is to like look at the body of knowledge that is there and try to either add to that body of knowledge by creating new objectives or trying to repeat what other people have done to corroborate what already has been done. So that's part of the scientific process. So what he's describing here is nothing else than just a part of the scientific process. And I might understand that might be disturbing for some very simple-minded people like Jordan Peterson, for example. But the reality is that science, that's how science works. And the more body of knowledge there is, and the more hypotheses have been proven and repeatedly proven and by other people, the more clear becomes the picture of what real facts are, and he just doesn't get all that, I guess, because that's just who he is,
In everywhere you look, if you're a scientist, everywhere you look into any given question deeply, you run into conundrums and profound sources of disagreement, even about what's hypothetically fundamental.
That is not true. There's a body of knowledge, and usually as a scientist, as a real scientist, you go with what the body of knowledge is, and then you build your hypothesis around that. So I really kind of love how non-scientists, be it like Mr. Jordan Peterson, who's not a scientist. He's not a scientist. He is somebody who interprets science or the knowledge he seems to have, or he wants to have, or he claims to have, but he's not a scientist. Scientists are people who actually work in science. They publish papers. They do peer-reviewed work. That is what scientists do. That's the job. That's like literally a job. So, and he's not that. He's not that. He's at the best a science commentator that doesn't understand science very well. But don't want to get too personal here, Mr. Peterson. I don't even know.
The climate science is a good example of that. Yeah. That's an appalling scam.
And here we go again. And this is Jordan Peterson's signature move, if you want to say. So he's like saying science itself is a very unsettled kind of thing for what reason ever. And then he says climate change in itself is like a scam, and then he will bring forward all his arguments that he has for that are all not based in facts, but he already laid the groundwork of like, oh, I am a scientist, I understand science. I found this video because I was was literally like searching climate change and global warming and hoax, so that was what I was looking for. This would not have popped up in my feed typically, so you already have a certain confirmation, you already have a certain bias, and then you want to watch something that confirms your bias, and that is what this is really made for. Because somebody who's a scientist who would not, knows this stuff. But let's keep on going so that this is more like for you guys to understand, how to debunk somebody like this.
How so?
Well, here's the simplest way to look at it. You can tell me what you make of this. Okay, so we're essentially in a carbon dioxide drought by historical standards. So that is not true. That is a lie. There's no such thing like a carbon dioxide drought to begin with. That's like the completely wrong word to use, And then secondly, that is not true. Carbon dioxide levels are at a historical high, and historical by a long time, by like 1 million years historical high. Okay. And it is also very, and I can let me show you the graph for this, since we're already on it. So let me just stop this quick, and I prepared stuff for you. So if you look at this graph here, you see this is like 800,000 years ago, and you see here, this is where we're at today at our carbon dioxide or greenhouse gas levels, like the carbon dioxide equivalents as well. We were never that high based on the models that we have, because of course 800,000 years ago there was no measurement. 2 million years ago there was no measurement, but based by a really long time, never that high ever. And the only time really the Earth atmosphere was like higher than that is like several million years ago. That was before humans even exist, so just want to get that out of the way before he's going to talk a lot about this. And this is it's simply not true. Look at the proportion of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere over the last number of hundreds of millions of years, like a pretty whopping time frame. We're at a very, very low level. We dropped.
So hundreds of millions of years, yes, we had higher carbon dioxide levels, but that was long before humans were even walking this earth. Right? Humanity is about 2.3 million years old. And in the last 2.3 million years, based on all the models, CO2 levels were low. They were lower than they were today. And there was never in the entire history of the world a increase in CO2 as fast as it was in the last just 50 years, let alone 100 years. In the models that we use to create our prediction models, we don't create those on like 100 million year scale. We create them in a 100-year scale, like a 50-year scale. I hope it is clear that that never happened in the entire history of the world, to our knowledge at least, that CO2 levels rise in such a small amount of time. Well, let's see what else he has to say.
About 350 parts per million by, say, 1850, something like that. Plants start to die at 250.
That's also not true. That's just not true. All right, well, plants need CO2 for sure, but they're not starting to die at 250.
Right, because they need carbon dioxide. So we were almost at the point where the plants were going to start to die. That's how low the carbon dioxide.
Plants are fine. Plants evolved with, as you could see in the graph that I showed, with a CO2 that was between 300 and 350 ppm for millions of years. That's how plants evolved. All right, they're going to be fine at 350 ppm. What evolutionary processes cannot handle is like a massive change in environment in not a lot of time. And that is what we're facing with climate change, you know. But let's keep on going.
Levels are now, they have been increasing. Why? Well, some of that's probably man-made. You know, that's not exact.
a huge body of evidence that points all into the same direction, that the CO2 and the greenhouse gases increase in the atmosphere. We know they increase in the atmosphere, and we know they trap the heat. We know that leads to global warming and other things that are all summarized under the umbrella of climate change. This is what's happening. I mean, you can't deny it. It's still happening, you know.
Settled, but we could give the devil his due and say some of that's man-made.
It's settled and it's man-made.
So now we're up to something in the low 400s, and that's been increasing, and perhaps because of industrial output.
This is against the vast majority of the body of knowledge that we have. It is certain that the increase of greenhouse gases is due to industrialization and the amount of CO2 and other greenhouse gases that humanity is emitting into the atmosphere, like 400 years plus, you know. So that is certain. I think our mission here is really to educate you to like understand science better, because we all need to be making fact-based decisions.
So what's been the major consequence? The major consequence is that the planet is 20% greener than it was in the year 2000. 20%. This is NASA data.
It's about 5%. The planet is about 5% greener than it was 20 years ago. It's not 20%, it's 5%. Okay, so that's number one. Number two is that the amount of greening that is happening in the last 20 years does not take away the effect of the deforestation of the Amazon, for example. You know, so it's not like balancing shit out. You know, that is not how it works at all. And then the third thing is, and that's what he's going to say in a minute, is that this greening is due to the emission of CO2 in the atmosphere, and that is not true. Almost 50% of that greening is due to direct human activity of replanting trees or reforesting, and that most of that is happening in China and in Asia, where big reforesting projects are happening. So that is where a lot of that is coming from. And I put the link into the description too. You can read this for yourself, but it is NASA data, but the 20% number is wrong. It is not misinformation, it's a lie. It's not 20%, it's 5%. And then also, half of that, at least half of that, is due to direct reforestation and replanting efforts. So that is the truth.
Disputes this, by the way. The satellite imagery is absolutely clear.
Okay.
I dispute it, and everyone else disputed it. That's 20%. It's 5%.
20% greener. An area the size of the continental U.S. has greened since the year 2000. So the whole planet is 20% greener. That's a big effect.
So you see here how often he makes this argument to run his number home. Just for you to like catch stuff like this, 20%, just because he says it 4 times doesn't mean it's true. All right.
Crop yield has gone up 13%.
No, it has not. So this is my area of expertise. I'm a plant scientist and a crop production specialist. So it is not. It is a lot harder to grow crops under those circumstances and than it was. Because global warming doesn't only come with like higher CO2 levels, it also comes with a lot of more pests and diseases and etc. So, that is just untrue.
Right. Okay. Where's the planet getting greener? Because you heard climate, global warming. The deserts are going to grow. Mm-hmm. Well, then it wasn't global warming because that turned out to be a scam. Then it was climate change.
Okay, and here's also another thing that a lot of climate change denialists say, including our beloved candidate for president right now. Global warming and climate change are not the same thing. Okay, they're not interchangeable. Nobody replaced global warming with climate change. Global warming is just an effect of climate change. Okay, there are other effects of climate change as well, but global warming is the one that's probably the most important and probably also the most known. But nobody replaced global warming with climate change because it was a scam. Okay, that has not happened. Global warming exists. It's a thing. We can measure it, and we measure it all the time, and it's happening. And if you live in the United States and you just went through the last month of June here in the United States, it's happening. Okay? You must have living under a rock if you don't know that it is happening. So, yeah, those two can exist at the same time. Imagine that. Imagine they can exist at the same time. It's mind-blowing, isn't it?
The deserts are going to grow. It's like, no, the deserts are shrinking. The deserts
are not shrinking.
Because the planet is greening.
See, so this is like also very simple-minded. Because he thinks like the planet is greening, therefore the desert must be shrinking. But there's no data that supports that, actually. Also, those two things can happen at the same time. Imagine that.
More carbon dioxide. Okay, so why are the deserts shrinking? Well, because plants breathe, and they breathe through these pores called stomata, and when there isn't much carbon dioxide...
He has a few notes there that he has to look at. It's pretty funny.
The stomata have to be open, and then the water evaporates. And so if you increase the carbon dioxide, the stomata close, and that means plants don't need as much water, so they can invade the semi-arid.
Wow. Okay. I don't know where to start here, man, but that's like plant physiology 101. So I don't want to go into a lot of details, but just because there's more CO2 in the air doesn't mean that the plant can all of a sudden grow in a desert. That's just not how it works. Again, evolution, man. Evolution is a key thing here. Okay? So, yeah.
Areas around deserts. And that's what's happening. So I truly believe...
It's not happening. This is not happening. You go to a desert and see if it's happening. It's not happening. Desertification is a thing, It happens. And it is driven by climate change. And then climate change is driven at the moment, at this point of time, where we are all on this planet, at this point of time, the climate change that we experience is mainly driven by human activity. Okay, CO2 and other greenhouse gas emissions. That is just a fact, dude. And just because you don't believe in that doesn't mean that this is not existing and this is not happening. It's just a freaking fact.
I believe this to be the case. If you a dispassionate look at the data and you looked at the effects of carbon dioxide, the biggest effect clearly by likely an order of magnitude is the greening effect.
No. It's not. The biggest effect of carbon dioxide increase in the atmosphere is the global warming effect. The greening effect is a very, very small effect, as I said, and a lot of that is driven by direct replanting efforts, mostly in Asian countries. So believe it or not, but that's what the data says. If you know,
it's like, well, is that good? Well, it's the opposite was what was predicted.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so and here we are, and this is really his main point that he wants to bring home. He might believe in all of this, you know, and it's pretty sad to see that somebody in 2024 really cannot interpret or doesn't want to interpret scientific data, because if he really looks at the data, he would know, you know. And but the big challenges of climate change, global warming, ocean warming, ocean salinity, rising of oceans, and those are all things that we can measure. We measure those every freaking day. We measure those, and we have not just prediction models. We also have historic data from the last 40 years that really show how that is driven by greenhouse gas emissions. So, and those are data that everyone can look up.
And the opposite was regarded as a catastrophe. Okay, so the opposite of a catastrophe is good. There's more plants and crops grow better.
And crops don't grow better. They just don't. Like, climate change causes a lot of problems for farmers and growers, not just like across the entire globe. So, you know, I don't know what to say, man. I mean, it's really sad that we're still at this point in 2024. You know, I feel like if humanity would be a little bit more smart, we all would work, you know, because this is like, you know, this is something where we all have to get together. We cannot be divisive. We cannot be black and white and think about, oh, this is good, this is bad. It's happening. It's a reality. And it's an opportunity for humanity to come together and work together to overcome this life-threatening problem, you know. And it is really sad to see that there are some people that get a lot of media attention, unfortunately, that get a lot of attention from politicians, unfortunately, that still think that this is for some reason not a real thing. And I would wish that everyone on this planet would start really looking at the data that we already have and really start listening to the real scientists of the world, and not the proclaimed scientists that are spewing misinformation like this Peterson. You know, unfortunately, you know, he would have the power, he would have the audience, and he would have the charisma to go out and talk about the true data and the facts, and instead of like leading people to believe that scientists are evil and climate change is an evil thing. And that's unfortunate. But that's the reality we're living in, and that's the reason why we're doing this video, is because we need to like start educating people on this matter, you know, because this is extremely important. And we're vetting again the internet for science, everything which is related to agriculture and food production. It's gonna come onto this channel. Subscribe if you haven't, and I'm gonna stop it here, and I see you guys soon.